I bid you welcome.
It's moving.
Even a man who is pure in heart and said his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane moons and the autumn moon is bright.
The greatest scientific find since the Peking man.
What you got, Mac? Someone unearthed a natural blonde?
Welcome to another broadcast of comics and pop culture. Let's talk shorts. Today we're going to rank Universal's classic monsters. This ranking will be based on box office, longevity, and enduring popularity. At number 5, it's The Creature from the Black Lagoon. This would be the last of Universal's creature features with an ongoing character. After the 1940s, interest in the classic monsters would wane and the 1950s would give way to more science fiction-oriented tales. Creature from the Black Lagoon premiered in Detroit on February 12, 1954. It's a black and white 3D monster horror film produced by William Allen and directed by Jack Arnold. The film's plot follows a group of scientists who encounter a piscine amphibious humanoid in the waters of the Amazon. The creature, also known as the Gillman, was played by Ben Chapman on land and by Riku Browning underwater. The first film is a classic and did great box office. A geology expedition in the Amazon uncovers fossilized evidence, a skeletal hand with webbed fingers, from the Devonian period that provides a direct link between land and sea animals. The Gillman wreaks havoc and kills several people before it is finally subdued. There were 2 sequels, Revenge of the Creature and The Creature Walks Among Us, with diminished quality and box office receipts. The creature's look would change and become less interesting with each film. Even though the first one is a classic and ranks among one of Universal's finest, the series would go downhill, which is why The Creature winds up at number 5 on our list. Yes, Clint Eastwood makes a cameo in the second film. I'll bet it's a screen presence that he later regretted. I'll bet you didn't know that Gilbert was related to the Munsters.
The number 4 horror icon is The Mummy. Inspired by the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 and The Curse of the Pharaohs, producer Carl Laemmle Jr. commissioned story editor Richard Shayer to find a novel to form a basis for an Egyptian-themed horror film. Just as the novels Dracula and Frankenstein inspired their 1931 films Dracula and Frankenstein, Shayer found none, although the plot bears a strong resemblance to a short story by Arthur Conan Doyle entitled The Ring of Thoth. In the film, Boris Karloff stars as Imhotep, an ancient Egyptian mummy who was killed for attempting to resurrect his dead lover, Enkiz-en-Amun. After being discovered and accidentally brought to life by a team of archaeologists, he disguises himself as a modern Egyptian named Ardith Bey and searches for Enkiz-en-Amun, who he believes to have been reincarnated in the modern world. Whilst being less culturally impactful than its predecessors Dracula and Frankenstein, The Mummy was still a moderate success. The sequels included 1940's The Mummy's Hand, 1942 The Mummy's Tomb, 1944's The Mummy's Ghost, and The Mummy's Curse. The Mummy also got the Abbott and Costello treatment in 1955.
Where will we find the mummy?
Don't worry, the mummy will find you.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Oh, don't hand me that. You're just wasting your time.
At number 3, it's The Wolfman. The Wolfman is a 1941 American horror film written by Kurt Siodmak and produced and directed by George Wagner. The film stars Lon Chaney Jr. in the title role. The film is the second Universal Pictures werewolf film, preceded 6 years earlier by the less commercially successful Werewolf of London, 1935. This film is part of the Universal Monsters movies and is of great cinematic acclaim for its production. After this movie's success, Lon Chaney Jr. would reprise his classic role as the Wolfman in 4 sequels. Larry Talbot returns to his ancestral home in Llanwrwly, Wales to bury his recently deceased brother and reconcile with his estranged father, Sir John Talbot. Larry falls in love with a local girl named Gwen Conliffe who runs an antique shop. Even though Lon Chaney Jr. reprised the role several times, there was never a direct sequel to this movie, which is why this character appears at number 3 on our list.
It's alive! In the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God!
At number 2 is Frankenstein. Frankenstein is a 1931 American pre-code science fiction horror film directed by James Whale, produced by Carl Laemmle Jr., and adapted from a 1927 play by Peggy Webling, which in turn was based on Mary Shelley's 1818 novel Frankenstein. or the modern Prometheus. Frankenstein stars Colin Clive as Henry Frankenstein, an obsessed scientist who digs up corpses with his assistant in order to assemble a living being from body parts. The resulting creature, often known as Frankenstein's monster, is portrayed by Boris Karloff. Frankenstein was followed by a string of sequels, beginning with Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, in which Elsa Lanchester plays the monster's bride. The next sequel, Son of Frankenstein, 1939, was made, like all those that followed, without Whale or Clive, the latter of whom had died in 1937. This film featured Karloff's last full film performance as the monster. Son of Frankenstein presented Basil Rathbone as Baron Wolf von Frankenstein, Bela Lugosi as bearded hunchback Igor, and Lionel Atwill as Inspector Crow. The Ghost of Frankenstein was released in 1942. The film features Lon Chaney Jr. as the monster, taking over from Boris Karloff, who played the role in the first 3 films of the series, and Bela Lugosi in his second appearance as the demented Igor.
I am Dracula.
At number 1 is Dracula. Dracula is a 1931 American pre-code supernatural horror film directed and co-produced by Todd Browning from a screenplay written by Garrett Fort and starring Bela Lugosi in the titular role. It is based on the 1924 stage play Dracula by Hamilton Dean and John L. Balderston, which in turn is adapted from the 1897 novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. Lugosi portrays Count Dracula, a vampire who emigrates from Transylvania to England. Dracula was a commercial and critical success upon release, and led to several sequels and spin-offs. It has had a notable influence on popular culture, and Lugosi's portrayal of Dracula established the character as a cultural icon, as well as the archetypal vampire in later works of fiction. The film was originally intended for Lon Chaney, who would play both the Count and the Professor, a stunt he had performed in several silent films. On his sudden death, casting the title role proved problematic. Initially, Laemmle was not at all interested in Lugosi, in spite of good reviews for his stage portrayal. Laemmle instead considered other actors. Lugosi lobbied hard and ultimately won the executives over, thanks in part to him accepting a paltry $500 per week salary for 7 weeks of work, amounting to $3,500. Lugosi had only played the character one time, twice if you count Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He never appeared in any of the Dracula sequels. He did, however, play vampires in films for other studios which were pretty much the same as Dracula but couldn't use the name as Universal, at that time, had the rights to the character. Lugosi edges Karloff for one reason, and that is because his memorabilia outsells Karloff's today by a substantial margin. And that was our ranking of the Universal monsters for this Halloween. What did you think? Do you agree with our ranking? Did we leave out any characters that you think should have been on this list? What was your favorite Universal monster movie? Let us know in the comments below, and, for more horror, check the comments below for the Carl Vincent, Vampire Hunter comics and novels. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Until next time, live long and prosper, may the force be with you and keep reaching for the stars.